Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Thorne, and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. Another packed week of aviation news. So I will introduce two of my regular co-hosts, and then somebody I'm upgrading from guest speaker to semi-regular co-host.
Promoted to business class.
Very well put. Very well put.
Sure. Everyone gets business class but me.
Let's start with our semi-regular guest host, Robert Docherty. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Second time appearance. So looking forward to the return trip back.
Oh, this is gold, isn't it? For those of you not aware, Rob primarily works for Defence Connect, which is like the sister brand of Australian Aviation.
Some would say the cooler version of aircraft.
Don't say that.
They would be wrong, of course.
That's not very nice. He was actually telling us before the show how much he preferred working with us rather than the usual crew on Defence Connect, who he described as being hopeless imbeciles. Is that not right, Rob?
I refuse to comment on the grounds I may incriminate myself further.
Obviously, Rob, because there's a bit of crossover when we write about the RAF and in Army Aviation, you will kind of quite regularly see his byline on Australian Aviation. So he's a semi-part of the family, like the extended family. A cousin.
It crosses over a little bit, but very rarely.
Very rarely. And we will get to why Rob is with us in a minute. And I will introduce my more regular, boring co-host, like the family you see every day and you don't really care about them. I think you both need to go on a holiday and then I'll miss you maybe in a few months.
Well, I am going on a holiday,
Well,
Adam.
there you go.
I'm going on two holidays very close to one another.
There you go. We'll get to miss you then, won't we? So anyway, this is Jake Nelson.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. And we also have Chris Fenton. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, it's usually at this point in the show that we do any kind of shout-outs, endorsements. Have we got any this week? Have we got any fans this week who have approached either of you?
Well, I did get a
shout-out?
lovely email today from the team at Rex.
Oh, lovely.
Regional Express. And I learned that Rex absolutely love us here at Australian Aviation. They're a big fan of you. So to Jessica and all the communications team at Regional Express, thanks for your support. We're glad that you love us here at Australian Aviation. We certainly love you back, and thanks for listening and joining us on this journey.
And have you got any celebrity or shout outs from fans of the show or anything, Jake?
Yes, just a shout out to Christian over at Virgin Australia. It has been noted to us secondhand that he is an avid reader and listener of Australian Aviation and enjoys our analysis on aviation topics. So we're happy to keep providing that, Christian.
I've noticed that our fans now, they're rising up the ranks, aren't they?
They certainly are. We're getting the airlines reaching out to us now, which is fantastic.
If you're an average listener, we're not interested anymore.
Oh, we absolutely are. We absolutely are. Right in for a shout out.
Have you got a shout out from any Joyce? Anyone named Joyce?
No, sadly not.
Well, we've got a shout out for Joyce Witherstone from Tuggerah, who is 87 years old and loves listening to our podcast while she's knitting tea.
Okay,
That's pretty close.
Right, let's move on. So now I was going to tee this up, but Rob, tell us why you are on the show this
Yes, tell
week.
us, Rob.
Honestly, it's a mystery.
It is a bit, and this relates to the same flight both Adam and I were on coming back from the Australian Defence Industry Awards in Canberra. And this,
Can I just stop you there? Congratulations on an amazing night.
Not my work, definitely the team's work
to
there.
all the team at DC, an absolutely brilliant night. I can't say it trumps our night of nights in the aviation sector, but from all reports I'm hearing, the awards down in Canberra last week were a brilliant night.
I mean, of course it doesn't trump it, Chris. I wasn't there.
Oh, neither was I.
Well, it does have to go a long way to beat the Thornies, but, I would say that...
We're not calling it the Thornies.
We so are.
I think you have to now. But in terms of thanks for everyone for coming to the Defence Awards as well and everyone who set that up. But that flight back from Canberra, we had a bit of an issue. Adam and I, of course, booked on that flight 11 o'clock in the morning. And there was a bit of a delay, wasn't there, Adam?
I mean, a bit of a delay is, well...
It hasn't left yet.
It hasn't left. Well, no, it hasn't left yet because that service was cancelled. I thought we would have a bit of a chat about this because obviously the kind of problems at Qantas have been talked about for an awful long time. And in particular, the problems on the Sydney to Canberra flights, which I think it was in August, had an appalling cancellation rate of, I think it was like 11% or something, which is extraordinarily high. high. And so we have now experienced that firsthand. Now, you would imagine that when we are flying, we would play the don't you know who I am card at the airport. But being decent, humble people, we like to fly a bit incognito. In many ways, that is, because we want to see what the listeners are seeing.
The plebs.
We don't talk about on the air. That's just...
Sorry, the pretty lovely aviation fans.
No. Right. So Rob, talk us through what happened. We initially had a flight at 11 o'clock. What was the experience?
So what unfolded was a series of updates where we were first given a delayed time of 1 o'clock from 11. It doesn't seem so bad in itself. And then to 2, and then to 4, and then to 4:30. And this occurred basically via Qantas app notifications. And when it was getting to about 4:40, that last lock-in time, Adam and I decided to approach the counter with one of our colleagues and just see what was happening with the flight, see if we could get a new flight booked. And I would say we were met with a very extreme example of the she'll be right Australian mentality, in which the whole flight was sort of laughed off. We were given a food voucher to go and spend $30 at the a nearby restaurant, and a very cavalier approach, I think, from the Qantas staff there, basically laughing, saying, "Well, there's nothing we can do about this. You're in for a 5-hour delay."
And that was the thing. They weren't horrible or they weren't rude, and so I don't want to sort of throw those particular people under the bus too much. But they were quite literally laughing. So we came up there and we're like, "There's been this long delay. Is there anything you can do to get us on an earlier flight?" Because that's actually one of the things they said on the app, like ask if you can get an earlier flight. And they were just laughing their heads off, having a joke. And it was like, "Yeah, it's been cancelled. There's no other seats for the rest of the day. Here's your vouchers." There was no sort of element, "Oh, we're really sorry this has happened," or anything like that. And it really did sum up some of the kind of customer service problems that a lot of people have seen around the country, because the problems that affected Qantas more generally, and we've said this before, have affected almost every major airline in the world. But it seems to be that the hate on Qantas is a little bit greater. And these are the sort of incidents that show you why. The whole way it was handled from start to finish was really poor. So firstly, bearing in mind that we effectively, the flight was cancelled, we effectively had a 6-hour delay. Now that has basically meant we could have got a coach almost to Sydney and back in that time.
We could have driven it. We could have taken the train.
Totally.
Yep.
So, what you'd have hoped in an ideal scenario is they would have said, your flight's been cancelled. Here's the reason why. You may be there with problems at Sydney Airport. We're incredibly sorry about that. Would you like your money back? And we can get you on a coach to take you there, or give us some help. Instead, it was just kind of laughed off.
What you should have done, Adam, is you should have just taken them aside quietly and go, "Listen, I understand completely, right? But these guys, they're from Defence Connect. Okay, they're a little... they're not quite right in their head, so it's best keep them happy."
To be very clear, they're not. They report on the defence industry. They are not armed soldiers. So we can't.
And not that you know of.
Not
Adam.
that I know of. But yeah, so anyway, the whole thing felt very poor. So at first we have a delay through the app. Now, the actual Qantas app works quite well when everything's going smoothly. But watching it try to handle a series of times being pushed back and then a cancellation, it barely works. So you kind of get the alert, never says sorry, and I don't know if that's a legal thing, never's ever said sorry. It's just like, we're informing you this has happened, which is all, and again, it might be a legal thing, it's already quite rude. Never gave us a reason why there was. And I think, again, it's a humanity. If they just said, "Look, we're incredibly sorry there's been this instance," none of that. And obviously the app's struggling to cope with all these various changes. So at one point it's saying, it said to us early in the morning, I got an alert, like, you might want to see if you can shift to an earlier flight to get around it. But when we tried to do that, it wouldn't actually let us. No. So that didn't work. Again, it was updating all the time. It was kind of crashing, or it didn't feel like it was working particularly well. I think we were going to get on the 4:40 or something flight, and then at the last minute, I kind of worked out we were sort of given the option to shift to the 4 o'clock flight, but it wasn't explained very well at all. No. So you're kind of switching your flight, and you're doing it kind of worried, will we end up on any kind of flight at all? The app just doesn't work. So there was no kind of humanity about it.
Were the staff paging passengers to alert them
No.
that there was an earlier
No.
flight?
No,
Or
so
we
everything
found an earlier flight for you?
It was obviously some automated thing through the app, or somebody pushed a button and it was all like pre-programmed stuff in. So again, there's no like humanity. Like say you'd got an email, even if it was kind of tailored, that explained in detail, so they're very sorry, but you just get an alert on your phone, and what would happen is you get the alert that said that this is the flight's change, but it wouldn't be till like 20 minutes later the actual app itself would show you what's happened. So then you get loads of confusion, what's going on, etc. But again, what's so extraordinary is that I think it was during the month of August, the delays on Qantas Sydney to Canberra were, I think it was something like 10-11%, which is an extraordinary amount. So that was a cancellation rate. But like we were saying earlier, you might as well drive at that point. You might as well get a coach. In fact,
definitely vindicating my decision to drive to Canberra this weekend.
But there you
Absolutely.
go. Because as well, like when you look at the Canberra flight, you can argue it's quite a kind of bougie thing anyway, because by the time you get to the airport, and most people will get to the airport an hour before their departure. By the time you actually fly, by the time you get out of the airport, that's probably going to take you at best a couple of hours. And bear in mind that you could get a coach, which also ironically goes from the airport, which will do it in 3.5 hours, that will take you from the centre to the centre.
Or a train.
Exactly, or a train. I think the train's like 4.5 hours. So already, like, you're paying a massive premium to fly. So, and not only that, the people that are flying that are, apart from us plebs, tend to be very important businessmen, politicians, whatever. These are sort of the people you want to impress. So if it is the case that you shouldn't be having all of these problems on the route, you should absolutely be sure to have a good backup option. But again, there's no backup option. There's just people kind of sniggering away.
I know that when I was at Air New Zealand, obviously weather issues are quite prominent in New Zealand, but for some of the smaller regional hops where the aircraft was a Dash 8 operating, if for some reason that Dash couldn't land in, say, Nelson, for example, Air New Zealand were extremely quick to organise bus or road transport for affected passengers if they knew there was going to be a flow-on effect.
Exactly. And they said to us, probably quite right, that there was no spare seats on the subsequent flights. But if you have a semi-regular problem, surely you just have a bus there, don't you? You just have some kind of backup option. What would that cost versus all the annoyance?
There's this service that American Airlines does over in the States, where it's basically it's an Airbus, so to speak, not the plane, but going to some smaller airports like Atlantic City or something. I think you book your service through to Atlantic City with American Airlines, but when you get to but you connect through a different airport, and when you get to that airport, it's basically you go through the gate in the airport terminal to a coach. And that coach is an American Airlines branded coach that will drive you to Atlantic City, but it's still counted as part of your flight.
Yeah, so there is precedent here. What I would say finally, and again, the people at the service desk were perfectly nice people. They weren't like rude or whatever. But like thinking of back in the day when I was like a customer service assistant or whatever, like working in shops and stuff. Obviously different role, but similar kind of customer facing thing. If someone came to me with a complaint and I was just laughing to my colleague, I didn't even feign some kind of upset there. And the manager saw that. You get fired, wouldn't you? You'd be like, get out. And there's kind of like, oh, well, here you go. Here's your voucher. Go away.
It's
like,
almost
that is
as
bad.
if they've become accustomed to the delays and cancellations. And it's like, oh, yeah, another day, business as usual. Here's your voucher. Off you go. Leave us alone.
Exactly. And
I think in this case, actually, what I was going to point out is this is an acceptance of mediocrity.
Yep.
There's an acceptance from travellers, myself included. I travel with Qantas. I give them a pass for being an Australian carrier, but I've accepted that there is going to be delays. And obviously that's happening with their staff as well. And are we saying that that's okay and acceptable for the industry?
It's not okay, and there should be some form of recognition. Like I remember my flying days, if there was ever a delay to a service, even 5 minutes or even longer, there was always 2 public address announcements made on board the aircraft. One from the captain or the first officer apologising for the delay in service and explaining the reason for the delay to the passengers on board, and a second one from myself or crew on board, again apologising for the delay and thanking people for their patience and understanding. Or an acknowledgement when passengers got on the plane. Good afternoon, Rob. Nice to see you again. So sorry for the delay today. Take your seat. We'll get you on your way as soon as possible. Thanks for your patience.
And this mirrors very closely, which is
That's less effective when the passenger is not called Rob, I will say.
This mirrors very closely to what happened back in January when I flew from London to Perth, and we had this, whatever it was, 6-7 hour delay. And again, I kind of got this letter, never said sorry, and it used this kind of mumbo jumbo to explain what went wrong. It was like operational issues, some, hiding the truth. And again, it was like, kind of tossed a voucher. The person at the service desk then, he wasn't laughing, was just quite outright rude. And I sort of think, well, if it's happening twice to me, and almost everyone has a bad experience, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but one of the things Vanessa Hudson, the new CEO, was talking about is addressing those pain points. But without wanting to sound patronising and horrible to Qantas staff in particular, there does need to be a rethink of training here, doesn't there? There needs to be rethinking, because if this keeps on happening, this isn't one bad apple. This is actually kind of a customer service problem they've got.
Well, I will point out, Adam, the expression is not, it's only one bad apple, so who cares? The expression is one bad apple spoils the barrel.
Well, yeah, and perhaps that's the case. But you touched on it there. There was almost an acceptance. It's like, well, what, this happens so often, we don't even have to make a special fuss over this.
Yeah, and I would say, within my own travels, because Qantas is an Australian carrier, you give them a pass. You give them a bit of leeway for some of the delays and things like that. It's a natural thing to do. And after this flight, I'm thinking, is that the right thing to do? Maybe we need a more competitive flight industry to deal with that.
Well, I think we also need some more regulation here, because in Europe and the US, for example, there are laws and compensations around delays. We don't have that here. Airlines are not held accountable to compensate passengers for delays. In Europe, you're entitled to a partial refund of your fare, depending on how long the delay is, something similar in the US as well. There needs to be more accountability here for airlines for their on-time performance.
I've seen in the US there was a tweet today. I refuse to call it a post or whatever Elon wants us to call it now. There was a tweet today where someone was saying that if their flight, this is American, I believe, that if the flight is oversold, airlines will offer passengers money to take a later flight. And this passenger was saying, I am the person who stands up in the lounge when the airline is offering $800 to say, no, they are legally obligated to offer you this much. You are entitled to this much. Everybody hold until they offer you that much.
But what they should have done in an ideal situation, they should have said, look, we're incredibly sorry there's been a cancellation. We can't get you on a flight till much later in the day. We will give you all of your money back. And ideally, they would have a coach or a bus waiting there, but they would say, you know what, there's actually a coach leaving here in an hour's time. We can help you book that. We're incredibly sorry, and then maybe give you some kind of credits as well. If they'd have done that and said sorry, you'd actually leave there kind of having a high opinion of Qantas, because I think most people are reasonable and understand that there are things outside airlines and airports control, but it's how you deal with it. And that, for me, feels like the difference of Qantas now than 5 or 10 years ago. This is why they've lost the brand a bit, I think, in the eyes of consumers.
I think, and this is very much a business-focused thing with that flight from Canberra to Sydney. You were saying before, business men and women take that flight. Even if they had offered somewhere, to work, like some sort of lounge access or something like that, that would have been perfectly fine. I would be happy to wait the 5 hours. Maybe not happy, but
get you in the chairman's club.
Maybe not. Yeah.
All the politicians would have been in there, I can assure you.
Well, not the chairman's, but, any
Well, I mean,
level
why not? Hey, you're being
somewhere I
delayed
could
for
work.
6 hours. You deserve a bit of chairman's lounge access as a treat.
Well, I wouldn't say no.
Out of curiosity, and not that it matters, was your original 11 a.m. flight a jet flight or a dash flight?
It would have been a Dash 8, I think, because we went over on the Dash 8.
Wasn't really a dash, though, wasn't more of a crawl 8 in this situation.
A crawl, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note, I think we're going to say thank you and goodbye to our semi-regular, my favourite host, if I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, it's less high maintenance than you two.
I see how it is, Adam.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Rob.
Thanks very much for
Come
having
back
me.
soon, Rob. We do love having you here.
Good to know I'm the favourite. I take that well. And I'm just going to teleport out of here. I'm gone.
Off you go.
Okay, welcome back. So we started there with a bit of an impromptu kind of review of our experience flying Qantas on Friday. And obviously, Qantas is all everybody in this industry has been talking about for the last few weeks in particular. Now, one of the biggest moments on Friday, and it was actually as we had our problems with the flight, was that Vanessa Hudson, the new CEO, came out and did a kind of video message to the punters saying sorry for recent bad performances, etc. This actually happened just as we found out the flight was cancelled. I thought they did recognise me, and Vanessa was like, we're going to have to get out there.
Just personally, we've inconvenienced who?
So, sadly, it wasn't. Now, I think we've all had different views on how this came across. You've probably all seen the video. If you haven't, we'll embed it on the article page of this podcast so you can watch it. So Vanessa's come out. Firstly, Jake, what has she said in this video message? Tell us about the message itself.
Yeah, so what Vanessa has said is she says, I know that I'm quoting from the video here. I know that we've let you down in many ways. For that, I am sorry. We've often been hard to deal with. We understand why you're frustrated, why some of you have lost trust in us. I know that our people have tried their absolute best under very difficult circumstances. I want you to know that we're determined to fix it, to improve the experience for you and to support our people better. She said, we want to get back to the national carrier that Australians can be proud of, that's known for going above and beyond. We understand we need to earn your trust back, not with what we say, but with what we do and how we behave. She said that work is already underway to improve the customer experience of passengers. She said, we're putting more people in our call centres to help solve problems faster. We're adding more frequent flyer seats. We're reviewing our customer policies to make sure they're fair. We're giving our frontline teams more flexibility to better help you when things don't go to plan, which would have been nice for you, Adam.
Would have been nice. Now, I'm very intrigued, as someone that's been following this story very closely over the last 6 months. How did you think she did in terms of her performance? How did she come across to you? Because one of the things we've been talking about the last few weeks is she's been a bit missing. We've not really seen anything of her. So this is her first real public appearance in front of Australia. How do you think she did?
Well, a confession time, Adam. I didn't watch the video. I read a transcript of it because I'm a very busy man and I don't have time to watch things with my eyes.
No.
But sorry is an important word to say, and she did say sorry, and she did sort of offer some idea of what Qantas is doing to make up for its missteps, even if it was sort of a pretty vague notion. But there are some concrete steps like putting more people in the call centres, adding more frequent flyer seats, because that has been a bit of a bugbear for people. There was a whole palaver a few weeks ago about frequent flyer seats supposedly being devalued and not enough reward seats being out on the network. She says they're adding more frequent flyer seats, and she did say that they're reviewing the customer policies to make sure that they're fair. So hopefully this is a sign of a more customer-centric approach. And Qantas did earlier this week, just yesterday, in fact, as of time of recording, they have put another $80 million into customer service improvements for the 2024 financial year. This is in addition to $150 million that they'd already budgeted. Qantas is basically saying that this is aimed at addressing a number of pain points. They want better contact center resourcing and training, an increase in the number of frequent flyer seats, more generous recovery support due to when operational issues arise, a review of long-standing policy for fairness, and improvements to the quality of in-flight catering. They're also looking to re-platform the Qantas app. So they're accelerating some initiatives, including that one.
But they really heard our problems with the app. They were like, right, get her out there. Let's rebuild the app. Now, so for those of you that aren't aware, Chris has had almost every job in aviation. I always say this, but it's true. One of his longest stints was working not just as cabin crew, but a cabin crew manager. And so, and I don't mean this in a kind of jokey way, but you know more about the punters and about people and dealing with people in aviation than anyone, because you see this firsthand. So I'm intrigued. How do you think she came across in that video?
Cold and scripted.
Oh, keep going.
So it was interesting when the news channels broke the story on TV and it was reported in the evening news. You see Vanessa walking around Qantas HQ in a lovely purple suit, but then they cross to Vanessa speaking to the Australian public in a yellow top, and none of the image matched. You could just tell they were trying to paint Vanessa in a really lovely, light way, and I'm sure Vanessa is a lovely person. I don't know Vanessa. I've not had any dealings with Vanessa, but I just found it extremely cold and extremely scripted. And it could have been more heartfelt and genuine than what it was, especially for her first. Here I am.
I'm going to say the total opposite. I think she played a blinder, and I thought this was very good. And I'm not just trying to argue with you.
No,
and I will tell you for why. Because firstly, the way she came across was, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but she came across like an ordinary person. She came across a little bit nervous, and she came across as someone that doesn't necessarily naturally take to doing these kind of interview opportunities. And so she, in that way, came across the polar opposite of Alan Joyce, who was incredibly polished, and then very clever with his media appearances. But I kind of think that's what the public want to see. They want to see less kind of razzmatazz and less pizzazz, and perhaps less aggression or less forthrightness. And they want to see an ordinary human being. And when she came across like that. And I think for me, when I watched that, I thought, here is a decent person who's been thrown in the deep end. She never quite knew she was going to have this to deal with. She's trying her absolute best. She clearly doesn't like dealing with the media. And to me, that it came across as a bit real. And again, I don't think that's something that she faked, or I don't think that people behind the scenes were like, Vanessa, this is what we want you to play. I think that was real. And as a miserable, cynical journalist, that's what I thought. So I'm very surprised that you read that in the other way. Because if you thought that, a lot of other people who watched it will also have come to the same conclusion.
Absolutely. And look, you could certainly tell she was nervous talking to the cameras and things like that. So you could see that she was out of her comfort zone. But as CEO, big kahuna of a business, I don't want to see someone out of their comfort zone. I want to see someone who knows what they're talking about, backs what they're talking about, believes what they're talking about, and delivers it so it doesn't sound like you're reading from a teleprompter or a script. And that's what AJ was very good at. He was very good at coming across as, well, I'm not reading off a teleprompter, I'm not reading off a script. This is what it's like. This is how it is. And I just think for the CEO of Qantas, we need someone who can be real.
Now, one of the interesting things about this, to give some context here, is this isn't the first televised sort of public apology we've had from Qantas. We had one about 18 months ago from Alan Joyce. In fact, I think he was almost stood in a very similar or the same position in the Qantas office, reading out a very similar thing. And this was during, obviously, 2022, when they were dealing with all of the staff shortages and, all the troubles at airports and everything was sort of falling apart. And he did this message and he said, look, we're very, very, very sorry. We promise you we're going to fix this. But then what happened is that some of their problems they did fix. So they did manage to hire more people, and a lot of the problems at the airport from the kind of the worst delays in history did start to dissipate. But then what Qantas did was they started trumpeting how well they were doing. So they were, sending communications where they were saying, we're the most on-time airline for like 10 months or whatever it's been. And the message was very much like, look how well we're doing. We're buying new aircraft. We've made a $2 billion profit, And it was all positive. We're doing really well. And that was the message. That was the new line. We've turned it round. And then all of a sudden, they're right back to, we're in a mess, we're so sorry.
They cried wolf far too early.
Jake, what do you think about that? Because to me, you're someone that's been covering this a lot. There's been a huge change of tone where they're now saying again, we are very sorry, when actually not that long ago they were saying we've turned this round.
I do think it's interesting. We've got a very real diversity of opinions in this room. We've got Chris, who didn't think she did well. We've got you, who thought she did very well. And we've got me, who didn't watch the video.
No.
But look, it's kind of been a couple of to borrow a phrase from your August Isles, Adam. It's been a couple of Anni Horribili. Annus Horribilis. It's been a couple of bad years.
For
Qantas. And it's kind. I think they were probably really wanting to get out this positive message, and take credit where it was due. And credit where it was due. They did manage to turn things around. They were improving things, but unfortunately, as you say, these other things came along, and so the performance issues may have improved, but the performance issues were not the only problems people were having with Qantas.
No, and again, one of the things we say time and time again is from a sort of an industry point of view, we know that a lot of the problems affecting Qantas are affecting almost every other major airline in the world, and in fact, not all of them, but many of them have also affected Virgin Australia at all. But you've almost not heard a peep about that. And one of the reasons I think we spoke before is they clearly have a bad relationship with the unions, which we can tell you firsthand gives them ammunition. And if you are angering those people, they will have a team of people that will have got plenty of ammunition to spread bad word in the media, something that hasn't happened at Virgin because they now have a much better reputation from the unions, but also that it feels like that they also have a bad reputation among some of their staff as well. And you've obviously got these kind of personal experiences like we've heard earlier, which have made it a lot worse for Qantas.
Well, another thing you have to consider, Adam, and sorry, Chris, I'll let you speak. I'll let you speak in a moment, Chris. I'm more important. But one of the things you have to consider, Adam, is that Qantas also, combined with Jetstar, has the lion's share of the domestic market. Qantas and Jetstar together, the Qantas group is just a bigger airline than Virgin is. And so when it is more likely, just from law of averages, really, that if something goes wrong on a flight, it's more likely to be a Qantas flight or a Jetstar flight than it is to be a Virgin flight, by the simple fact that Qantas and Jetstar combined have so many more flights, and they also have such a higher position of prominence within the psyche, if you like. Qantas is supposed to be held to this high standard as our national carrier, the spirit of Australia, the Flying Kangaroo, and Virgin is there also.
Now, one of the fascinating things is I think the average punter knows that Jetstar is part of the Qantas group. But when you combine them both, and it does vary month to month, they've effectively got like 70% or so.
Something like 60 to 70%.
Exactly.
It's a huge share.
It's a huge share. Is that there can't be many countries as both population-wise and it's kind of, Australia is a big economy that that are very reliant on air transport, but it's got almost like a monopoly, one dominant company. I can't think of another country that would ever accept this. My argument would be more generally, if you had more competitors, more entrants, then that would sort a lot of these problems out.
Very true.
Okay, Scott.
And Chris, you were going to say something as well?
Yeah, so I was just going to, I guess, reverse back to something that Vanessa said in her apology, and that being work has already begun in fixing a lot of these issues, yet yourself and Rob and our team experienced that issue firsthand on Friday.
Well, she did say begun. She didn't say finished.
Yeah, true. But if work's already begun behind the scenes on improving the customer experience, and then you guys have check-in staff or gate staff pretty much laughing about a delay and not giving a crap, and here's your voucher, off you go, shoo, fly, don't bother me.
But what I would also say...
I guess what I'm saying is the proof is in the pudding.
Exactly. The proof is in the pudding. And also what I would say is that when we talk about customer service, this is such an intangible thing, and it's about culture. One of the things this is a total tangent. One of the things I really hate is businesses on their website that talk about what a wonderful culture they have. Our staff are so happy and they love coming to work. And I always say, it's not your place to say that. That's ridiculous. That's you reviewing yourself. So I always think this is ridiculous. And my view is a culture is something that comes naturally, that you can't artificially change. And changing this culture is going to take an awful lot of time. And it's not... Training maybe will help and maybe policies will help, but this is something that's going to take years, because at the moment it feels like a bad culture is embedded within a lot of Qantas staff, and that's going to take a while to work through.
Absolutely it is, and I do not want to take away for 1 minute from all the amazing staff that Qantas have that go to work every day and put their Qantas pride on and are so proud to represent the airline and go above and beyond for the customers, because there's certainly those staff members out there. And there's certainly the staff members out there that just roll on up and roll with it and roll with the punches and another day, yep, smile, wave, see you next time, bye-bye, whatever. Those people need to go. If you don't like it, leave.
If I were speaking to Vanessa tonight, I would say what you need is a consultant, a master in customer relations to come in and advise you and lead this change. I know who I'm looking at. You could still do. You could.
I love my
think
job
so.
here at Australian Aviation.
No, but you could do that on the side. A side hustle. They're big now, aren't they?
Yeah, side hustles are big.
And if I was speaking to Vanessa tonight, Adam, I would say, "What are you doing in my house?"
On that note, we're going to go for a break. he's lost for words again.
Have a drink, everyone.
Have a drink. Okay, welcome back. So after the usual plethora of Qantas stories, let's talk about Virgin and Bonza. Let's start with Bonza first. So Jake has written a story today, a very good exclusive. Basically, Bonza has started to give some more concrete details on just how full their aircraft are. Now, the reason why, for you new listeners here, that is a story is that Bonza fly what they call point-to-point routes. And effectively, that means they fly from holiday destination to holiday destination rather than flying from capital to capital or from capital to a city within the same state. And basically everybody in industry, all the CEOs, they said even quite aggressively, this will never work. We've thought about this for years. It's absolutely not going to happen. Bonza now, who's been going for nine months now, had come out with some concrete detail that says the opposite. Jake, tell us a little bit more. How well are Bonza doing?
I spoke to Carly Povey today, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at Bonza. She said that during the peak periods, during the school holidays, Bonza is seeing load factors above 90%. Which is it's astonishing. And she said that the more popular routes, such as Albury to the Sunshine Coast, are seeing 100% capacity on most days. They are full. She says in off-peak periods, she said that the number has a 7 in front of it. So off-peak periods, the load factors are in the 70s. But even in this off-peak, she said that on certain routes, such as Albury and Avalon to Sunshine Coast, load factors are consistently above 90%. And these are, I believe, two of the routes that have added capacity when Bonza sort of slashed a few of its routes a few months ago. First 10 days of the school holiday period, there were 30,000 passengers roughly across the Bonza network. So that's about 3,000 passengers per day. In total, it's maybe 160 full flights on one of its 737 Maxes, because they've got just north of 180 seats on each of their planes. They do 116 flights per week. Most popular routes during the holidays for them, in no particular order: Bundaberg to Melbourne, Newcastle to Whitsundays, Albury to Sunshine Coast, Melbourne to Mackay, and Cairns to Sunshine Coast. Most popular destinations: Whitsundays, Mackay, Melbourne, Sunshine Coast, and Mildura. And of course, as you said, Adam, this definitely goes against everyone. Everyone in the industry was saying, Alan Joyce was saying, Jane Hardlichka from Virgin was saying, John Sharp from Rex was saying, this is never going to work. We're too small. Nobody's going to, want to fly from Albury to the Sunshine Coast or wherever. And it turns out, yes, they do in significant numbers.
Now, one of the things we said before is they have a network which they are going to be kind of constantly adding to and removing some routes, and some of them will work and some of them won't work. But what we can say definitively now is that the vast bulk of the industry who came out and said this will never work, and all these smarty pants number crunchers who went, we've done the analytics, it's never going to work. They have been proved spectacularly wrong. Their
At least so far.
At least so far.
Eating humble pie.
They are eating humble pie. And I think this is a great success story because a lot of people wrote them off. Tim Jordan, the CEO, who, credit to him, I would say is quite a down-to-earth kind of character.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Just in terms of dealing with him, always makes the time for you. And even this might sound like a silly thing, he goes around wearing his Bonza polo shirt, and just generally seems a lot more of a kind of an underdog character. He really has shut a lot of people up. They've taken a monumental gamble in launching this because a lot of money involved in this, and they have, at least so far, made it work.
Absolutely. And we were talking about culture just in the last segment. And it seems from the top down, Bonza is a fun, amazing place to work where there's an amazing culture. Everybody believes in the product. Everybody believes that there is a purpose to what they do.
And from a journalist perspective, when you ask a question, generally speaking of Bonza, you will get a straight answer.
Yep. And that does count for a lot. I would also say the people that I know kind of outside this job who happen to have flown with Bonza all speak incredibly highly of their experience.
I haven't heard one person yet speak negatively about a Bonza flight. I've heard people, and I've seen YouTube flight reviews on Bonza flights where people have said that potentially the in-flight ordering app didn't work for some reason, but they went on to say how amazing and attentive the crew were, individually offering every customer something to purchase from the menu and offering a tailored service.
So let's move.
Well, yeah, that's one of the features that Bonza offers. You know, they don't come down, you know, once or twice during the flight with the drinks trolley. If you order something on the Bonza app through the Wi-Fi on the plane, the flight attendant will bring it to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just you have, you know, you can order stuff throughout the flight rather than, you know, having to wait for the drinks trolley to come around or to flag down a flight attendant as they come past.
Correct.
Sorry, I was going to say to sort of move this on a little bit. Now, one of the reasons Bonza as a business can work is they have a kind of unique business model where they will call like low frequency. So essentially, they'll only do maybe 1, 2, or 3 flights to a destination each week, and that's how they can have a relatively small fleet of aircraft and kind of make that work. They've also got the 737 MAX, which is a more fuel-efficient aircraft, so they can pass on that saving to consumers. But notwithstanding that, there is still nothing stopping Jetstar or Qantas or Virgin
or Rex
moving into some of those successful routes. Could we not see a situation where brave old Bonza that go in there and prove everybody wrong end up getting stung, and maybe rightly so, by the bigger players that want a slice of that pie? What do we think of this?
Look, there's certainly potential for the bigger players to go in and, okay, Bonza's making this work, but the risk in doing that is you put competition on the route, you start to price gouge the consumers. What do the consumers do? Put their hand up and go, no, too hard. Bye-bye.
I think it's more likely to be seeing competition on these routes from someone like Rex than from Qantas and Virgin, because you know, Rex. The motto for Rex, our heart is in the country. You know, they are very big on flying to and from regional destinations. Would they use 737s? I don't think so. They'd probably be, you know, looking more at using their Saabs and their turboprop aircraft to fly smaller flights. And there's been a lot of commentary saying that, you know, when Bonza's launching these new routes, because they have in the past few weeks launched or announced the rollout of quite a few new routes. They're going to be flying to Launceston, they're going to be flying to Mount Isa, they're going to be flying to Darwin, to Alice Springs. And, you know, people are saying, oh, if you're going to Mount Isa or something, why are you using a MAX 8? You should be using, you know, an ATR or a Dash 8 or something like that. So I could see perhaps Rex on some of these routes, you know, kind of moving in now that Bonza's sort of shown the way and running these smaller flights. One thing that Carly Povey did say to me as to why these routes have been so successful, she said, you know, they've got low ticket prices, you know, they don't charge a lot for a ticket. They are a low cost carrier. They also there's people who have previously been unable to fly to the place that they want without having to connect through Melbourne or Brisbane or something. You know, she said, we meet a lot of people flying with us that were either in the car for incredibly long periods of time or just didn't get to see their relatives as often as they'd like to. She said, I think it's pent-up demand. It's the ability to travel in a way that saves time and money, and also new destinations. A lot of the destinations we serve across regional Australia, Bonza is really the first to open these destinations up to leisure tourism. She says she doesn't think the demand is dropping at all.
And then this is the fascinating thing, because a lot of their insight will honestly be coming from interacting with passengers and also obviously seeing the demand. And that's just something that I call them the clever clogs, the smarty pants at the bigger airlines, crunching their numbers, looking at their algorithm, looking at their spreadsheet. You can't understand that qualitative thing, because they make a very good point that this is, you know, what people want. And it will also be very good for a lot of these destinations they're flying to too, because it's going to be a significant influx of tourists they wouldn't have had previously.
And I know that when they just recently announced the new Gold Coast Darwin service, my friends in Darwin jumped on the app downloaded the Bonza app straight away and started booking the airfares, because they were like, we've got a low-cost option now to get from Darwin to Coolangatta without having to go into Brisbane and catching a train down or anything like that. So it's success. And what Bonza do is they listen to their customers. Whereas what I find often a lot of our other traditional airlines, they do market research groups, but on the wrong customer. They're targeting the business customer, the high-end customer. What Bonza's doing really well is targeting the families, the everyday Aussie.
And it's sort of we come back to something that we've said a couple of times on the podcast. You know, I've said a few times, who would have imagined before Bonza came along that there would be so much demand for people to fly between Albury and the Sunshine Coast? Nobody would have thought of connecting those two specific destinations. That the attitude, well, why bother? You got a small town on the border of, a smallish. A smaller destination on the border of New South Wales and Victoria, and you've got this smallish tourist destination up on the Sunshine Coast. Why would it be profitable to fly between these two destinations when we can focus on the Golden Triangle? But then Bonza comes along and they give it a try, and it works. And it comes back to this whole thing. Well, we don't know if we don't know for sure that these routes are not going to work unless someone tries them.
Absolutely.
Wow. On that note, I think we will.
Go Bonza.
We will go. But no, actually, I would say well done to Bonza.
Yeah, go Bonza.
Bonza. We're obviously very impartial service here, but
Just
I would
fly
say
to Sydney.
They'd like to. They'd really like to, but
I'm not going to open
slots.
that chestnut, but.
Right. Now, time has unfortunately beaten us.
Really?
An action-packed,
Already?
yeah, it's an action-packed show. So we will wrap it up. I should say we are also, if you want to get in touch, write a comment on our website, send us an email, media@australianaviation.com.au, or comment on our social media posts as well, particularly like your feedback. What's it been like for you guys flying Qantas? You had bad experiences or good experiences as well. Like Chris says there are a lot of fantastic, brilliant people working at Qantas who probably get very frustrated by that. If you have any good stories about dealing with Qantas, we'll absolutely read them out on the show.
And if you've got any stories about flying with Bonza as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I do read the comments on our socials.
Sorry about that.
Oh, why? Why would you do that to yourself, Chris?
Well, mainly on LinkedIn. I read the comments on our stories that we post on LinkedIn, and I give some comments a like and stuff like that. We posted and I know that we're about to say goodbye, but we did a story earlier today about goiter, and it's time to go. And the comments flooding in on that is unbelievable. So we do read the comments, and I would love to read out some lovely comments from our listeners and viewers.
But first they have to be lovely comments.
They do have to be lovely comments about their great experience flying with all of our airlines here in Australia. And if you get the crew's name or flight numbers, we'll give them a shout out on the podcast for sure.
On that note, we will wrap things up. I will say goodbye to my two remaining co-hosts. Chris, thank you very much for joining us.
Stuck with us. Thanks for having me.
And Jake, thank you very much for joining us.
I don't like the sound of remaining, Adam.
No. And we will be back on this show the same time next week. But for now, from us, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.